Hi there and welcome back to part 6 of our little tutorial series about creating the classic game Pong in Unity. Today we'll have a look at creating an AI opponent for us so that we can play the game even if we don't have a second player at hand. And while doing so, we'll have a look at some important programming principles like enums and boolean operators. If you haven't checked out the previous parts, I highly recommend doing so, starting with part 1, as these are building on top of each other. And yeah, so it's highly recommended to start at the beginning and go from there. Although, if you don't want that, if you just want to check out this video, there's a GitHub repository, the link is in the description, and there are tags after each video, so you can check out exactly the repository state after each tutorial. This video will consist of 3 parts. In the first one, we're going to distinguish between the player and the AI. So we're going to make it possible to switch the game mode from 2 players to player versus AI. In the second one, we're going to implement the actual AI movement logic, and we're going to go step by step here, starting from very simple to less simple, but still not really complex. So no worries, it's not going to get too hard here. And in the third part, as a little bonus, we're going to implement a functionality so that 2 AIs can play against each other, and we can just watch our game play itself. Let's head into our game manager first, and to distinguish the play modes, we're going to add something that we haven't used before, and this is called an enum. And this is to distinguish the play mode. So we have player versus player and player versus AI as play mode. So what is an enum? It's an enumeration, and it's basically an integer spelled out as a string. So you can see, like, if you hover over this, this is 0 and this one is 1. And yeah, an enum is like more descriptive than an integer. If we would just use an integer for the play mode, and if we added more play modes later, which we will do at the end of the video, then it would quickly get a bit out of hand. So what is 0, what is 1? Right here with an enum, we can just read it and it's clear. So, but to use this enum, we also need a variable. And so we're gonna go public play mode and just call it play mode. Back inside Unity, let's create a button as part of our menu to switch between the game modes. So let's just go on menu, create UI, and we're going with Text Mesh Pro button. And we're gonna position this a little bit like down here maybe. Yeah, this looks pretty good. And make it a little bigger, maybe 240 by maybe 60, or let's go with 80 here. And we don't actually have to name it because we're gonna set the text from code depending on which game mode we are in, but just for now, switch mode, let's just call it this. It's gonna have the name of the game mode on it later. Let's make this bold and maybe a little bit bigger. Yeah, this looks pretty good. Let's head into our game UI script, and at the very bottom, let's add a new method that can get called whenever the button gets pressed. And we're gonna call this on switch play mode button, and yeah, maybe on switch play mode button clicked or pressed, however you want to call it. If it's descriptive, that's good. And yeah, it's gonna do 2 things. It's gonna call switch play mode on the game manager instance, which we haven't implemented yet, and also adjust play mode button text. So we're gonna change the text on this button, but we haven't implemented these yet. But it's totally a fine approach to do it like this, like to lay out your plan for the future with comments. It's like these little 2 slashes, and just plan ahead and then implement it. So for now, we're going to go back into Unity and just hook up this button. I called this already not just button, but play mode button, so it's more descriptive. And now we're going to assign this canvas object, which has our game UI component on it. And on the game UI, we're going to call on switch play mode button clicked. Going back into the game manager script, let's implement this switch play mode method, and it's a very straightforward thing. This is just a switch on this enum variable, and we got two cases so far, player versus player. And if we are in the state player versus player, then we want to change to player versus AI and vice versa. And switch statements and enums, I think, are like a match made in heaven. It's so easy to read this and figure out what is going on, much easier than with integers, for example. So now we can save this one, go back into the game UI script and just remove these comments, and we got our method done. Next up, we got this adjust play mode button text method, and I'm just gonna paste this in. So we need a reference to the play mode button text. I'm just gonna move this up here. But you see, we don't have to like have all these variables up here. It's just standard to have them up here. You can have them between methods too. But yeah, I like this style a lot, and I think it's really common to do it like this. And yeah, now we got our adjust play mode button text method that we can call. And what do we do here? Well, it's also pretty straightforward. We define a string s. We have to define it here. Or maybe we don't have to define it here. Okay, we can just... So we're going through these cases of play modes, player versus player and player versus AI. And we can just do it like this maybe. So in case of player versus player, we can set the text to two players, and otherwise player versus AI, and then we don't need this extra string. So these are two ways you can do it. You can define the string first and then set the string in the cases, and then set the text to this string s, or you can do it directly inside the cases. So we're gonna just do it directly inside these cases. Now, finally, for this first part, we can distinguish inside the paddle script if we have a player or an AI controlling this paddle. And for this, I'm just going to add a little helper method to the game manager, which tells us if player 2 is an AI player. And this just compares if the play mode is player versus AI, that means player 2 is an AI. And inside the paddle script, we can now go into our update method, which so far has only processed player input. And we can make a little comparison here. So if ID equals 2, that means it's player 2. And this double AND is a boolean operator, like it means AND. So it's only true, this whole thing, if the first part is true and the second part is also true. Otherwise, it is always false. And the game manager instance, player 2, is player 2 AI? So, and in the else case, I'm just gonna write this down real quick and explain it in a second. So, we got, if ID equals 2, so if it's player 2 and player 2 is an AI, then we want to call our AI code. Yeah, call AI move code. We can just leave a comment here for now. Otherwise, it's a player controlled paddle, and we're just gonna do it just like before. So, and to go back to this boolean operator, so there are 4 cases we can have here. So either this first one is true and the second one is true, then this one is called. Or the first one is false and the second one is true, then it goes into the else case. Or if the first one is true and the second one is false, it also goes into the else case. And if both are false, it also goes into the else case. So it's only true if both conditions are met. That's this AND operator. Let's test out if everything we've done so far works. And for this, we're gonna just add a little method, which is later gonna house this movement code, and call it from here. And we just want to check if it's called for the correct paddle and for the correct play mode. So let's go back into Unity and let's check this out. First of all, we have to assign this play mode button text on our game UI script. And now, oh, one more thing that I missed. And okay, maybe we can check this out live. Okay, so it's still gonna say switch mode on this button. This is just a null reference. That is nothing too bad. So if we switch here, it's going to do it. But in the beginning, it still says switch mode. So let's go back into the game UI script and let's add an awake method and just call adjust play mode button text so that it's correct at the beginning. So we made this play mode a public variable on the game manager, so we can change it from here, so we can change the initial game mode. Now this should work. Let's check it out. So, okay, we got a null reference exception right here. What is this? Oh, the game manager is not instanced yet. That's too bad. This leads me actually to another thing. Okay, I should probably cut this from the video, but let's go into it real quick. So this awake method, and we also got the game manager awake method. Yeah, which one is called first is not determined at the moment. So one could be the first to be called, and then the other one. And if the game UI script calls its awake method and does this, and wants to get something from the game manager instance, but the game manager instance has not awoken yet, so instance is null, then we get this null reference exception. For now, we can just change this one to be the start method, because each start method is called after all awake methods have finished. But if you want to check this out more, this is like a really complex topic. There's this thing in the project settings. Maybe I can show you real quick. In the project settings, yeah, if you're going back into play mode, it's always full of errors, so we can just ignore this. In the project settings, there's this thing called script execution order. And here we could, for example, say, let's just do it. It doesn't hurt us. We can drag this game manager in and give it a smaller script execution order, so it's always executed first and we always have this game manager instance available to us. So that's two possible routes to solve it. We went both now, so let's finally test if this is working, and I hope it is. So we got two players, we click the button, it changes to player versus AI, it logs move AI with ID 2, and if we click it again, we go back to two players and it stops logging this. So this works as expected. Part 1 done. All right, let's actually move our AI pedal now. And for this, because we want to move it according to the ball's position, let's add a reference to the ball on the game manager so we can access it from everywhere. And for the simplest, very simplest implementation, I'm going to remove this debug log. We already tested it. We just follow the Y position of the ball. So we get the position of the ball from the game manager, which has this reference to the ball, and then its transform position. And we set the transform position of the pedal not to the ball position, because then it would move on the horizontal axis with the ball. That would be super awkward. I don't know what would happen if we would do that. But we want to let it sit at its start position X and just take the ball's Y position. And let's check out how this feels. And it's going to be awkward, but it is an option. First of all, let's assign the ball reference to the game manager, and maybe I will change the initial play mode to player versus AI, so that we don't have to click each time. Okay, let's check this out. Player versus AI, and now it's really moving with the ball, and it is glitching through the walls, and it is playing pretty much perfectly. Yeah, we cannot beat this player, but this is a viable thing to get some training done. Hey, are we in a position that it's not endless, okay. But we had just the angle. But yeah, for practice purposes, this is great, but we cannot beat this AI, so we're gonna implement something else. But feel free to make like an enum, for example, to distinguish between different AI behaviors. And so you can switch them out on the fly, have different methods for them, and just yeah, depending on the enum value, switch between different methods to call for the movement of the AI. But for now, let's go on with our AI code. So the human player, they got like a movement speed, right? Wouldn't it be cool if the AI was also bound to this? And we can do that very easily by just using this move function. So let's get rid of this transform position thingy and do this instead. So we're using the move function with a direction. And the direction is just up or down. Up is 1 and down is -1. And it's determined by this ternary operation. So if the ball's y position is bigger than our own y position, then we move up because the ball is above us. Otherwise, we move down. So this is the very simplest thing besides the first one that we can do. And let's check out how this one looks. And I'm just gonna hit maximize on play so we can see it better. And you already see the other one glitching. Why is that so? So I can maybe explain to you right now. The ball is in the center and this pedal is always either moving up or down at the moment. And if it is moving up, even if the ball stays still, then it's above the ball and it's immediately moving down again. So this is like frame by frame, it's going in different direction and this makes it so glitchy. This is what it does all the time. But actually, let's play one round against it and see if we can win, because now it's using the movement speed of the player. And no, okay, it's still pretty good. Like better than I am. Maybe I can win now because now we got like more of an angle going. Not yet. Okay, maybe now. No, oh, come on. Okay, why is it so good? Okay, I got a point, but that was some match right there. Okay, so it is possible. But yeah, this glitch problem, we gotta deal with that. One thing we can try is introducing a dead zone. So with this variable, AI dead zone, so that's an area where there's no movement prior to before where there was always movement. And we can use it like this. So we still got our direction, but by default it's 0, so no movement. And we only move if we are outside the dead zone concerning the y position difference between the ball and this pedal. So this is what this term does. It means, so this is the difference between the y position of the ball and the pedal, but it could also be negative. And if it's negative, we use math absolute to make it positive so we can compare it to this AI dead zone value. So if this is outside the dead zone, so we can also make this term, like put it into a method and call this method is outside dead zone and return a boolean value with exactly this. I encourage you to try this out. But if it is, then we still need the direction and we're gonna get it just like before. So this is the same line as before. We're just not always using it. Sometimes it's gonna be 0 when we're inside the dead zone. So let's check this out. And let's start the game. And yeah, sometimes this pedal is not moving at all. And then it's moving. Okay, so this is still a bit stiff, maybe I would say. But it feels better already, and it's still a little bit glitchy sometimes if we're like at low speeds. Maybe, I don't know if you can see this in the video. Not glitchy, but it's stuttering a little bit. So let's try something more. I wonder what happens if we take this direction out of this function and just make it a private variable. What does that mean? So it means we introduce it with 0, so the pedal is not moving at the start. But then it never becomes 0 again. And it's changing direction when outside of the dead zone, but while still inside the dead zone, which prior to this, in the last try we did, was stopping the pedal, it's still gonna move in the direction it already had. So let's just see how that feels. So you gotta just try things out and see how they feel. So this, okay, yeah, it's like it has this little overshooting thingy, but this is like, I think this is pretty cool. Like it feels frantic and alive. Doesn't really feel too much like a human player maybe, but I think this is pretty cool. Like this and the one prior to this, I like those two the most. Yeah, maybe we can try one more thing and then wrap it up a little bit. So since our AI is not behaving that much like a real human, we might as well just double down on it. And for this, let's introduce a new variable. Let's call this one move speed multiplier and introduce it with a value of 1 definitely, because for the player, this is going to stay 1 all the time. And in the move method, we're going to multiply this in this new move speed multiplier. And now for our move AI script, we're going to randomize this one a little bit. So let's put in this one. If random value is below 0.01, that means like there's a 1 in 100 chance each frame that this gets triggered. So on average, it gets triggered every 1 to 2 seconds at 60 frames per second. Then we randomized this move speed multiplier a little bit, and I picked a rather high range here. You can definitely make these two values into public variables, so you can adjust them in the inspector. Also this one, every time you see like a number, you can make this a public variable, so you can adjust it in the inspector. I'm not gonna do this for each and every one of them here, but I encourage you to do it. It's good practice. So now let's see how that one feels. Okay, let's start the game. So okay, this is a rather low angle, but yeah, it's still got like this little overshooting problem where it moves up and down, but at least it's fluent and it changes its movement speed a bit randomly. That's cool. I think this feels pretty good, to be honest. So I think we're gonna leave our experiments concerning like the AI behavior at this. Maybe I will try to get 1 point against it. So, okay, that was easy because it now slowed down. Like, but this is like pretty erratic and frantic. I like it. I don't know how challenging it actually is. It's random. And yeah, this is totally a valid design, but if you want it to be like more consistent, you of course gotta dial down on the randomness. So that was part 2, and for part 3, let's add a play mode that is AI versus AI. And yeah, now we just gotta find all the references to display mode. We can right click here and find all references in Visual Studio, and then we can see these. Okay, that's a lot. Yeah, okay, probably we should go with this one. Yeah, switch play mode. So now we're just gonna add new cases here and yeah, do what we can to make it work. And okay, so we got AI versus AI, and now we gotta adjust this one too, because this is the switch play mode method. If we are on player versus AI, we want to switch to AI versus AI. And if we are on AI versus AI, we want to switch back to player versus player. What else do we have? We have this one. It's the play mode button text. Okay, let's adjust this one too. Let's add another case for AI versus AI and just call it AI versus AI. Now what we also got here is this method in the game manager that tells us if player 2 is an AI. And now it's an AI in 2 cases, and we also want to see if player 1 is an AI. So let's replace it with that. So for player 1, this is easy. It's just like this if we have the play mode AI versus AI. Player 2 is an AI if we have player versus AI, or AI versus AI. So this is the OR operator. You saw I'm just going to type it down here, the AND operator, which makes this whole thing true only if both parts are true. But the OR operator makes this whole thing true if just one part of this is true. So again, we got 4 cases, and 3 of those return true. And this is if play mode, like if this one is true or this one is true. Only if both of them are false, so if we are in the play mode 2 players, then this returns false and player 2 is not an AI. So now we just gotta extend the distinction inside the paddle script, and because so far we are only checking player 2, but we also want to check player 1. And for this, let's create a new method that does this for us so we don't clutter up the update method so much. So first of all, we just have to call this method in here, and then we can move the AI. And I'm not sure, yeah, okay, it goes away. And this method, okay, so we gotta check if we are player 1 and if player 1 is an AI, or if we are player 2 and player 2 is an AI. And this is exactly how this one reads. So if ID equals 1 and player 1 is an AI, the ID of this paddle, this means, yeah, that we are just concerned with. So there are 2 paddles, so we gotta check this. And for the second player, just the same. And then we just say if is player 1 AI, so this paddle is player 1 and an AI, or this player is paddle 2 and an AI, then use the AI code. So back inside Unity, let's see if our self-playing game actually works. So we click the button, okay, we can toggle between these modes. All right, this one works. And let's just start the game now. Okay, this is like an edge case of a very low angle. Let's try that again. We're gonna get to the ball angle in the next video in this series. So let's try that again. Higher angle this time. Okay, this is still a very low angle, but you see, they are moving swiftly and they are playing against each other. I'm not typing anything here, not doing anything. Maybe I can turn on the audio actually, so we can hear some music and sounds while watching this game play out. And this is super relaxing, I think, not having to do this myself. And there are quite a few games that rely on like automatic stuff like this. So you could totally make something out of this. Maybe make like an upgrade game where you have to upgrade your AI to become better than the other AI and send it into the ring for you, something like that. That's totally possible. Yeah, I could watch this for a long time, but let's go to the outro now. Once again, there are many approaches and options to implementing AI for a game. So we just did something really simple here, and even in this simple state there's already so much you can do, and I encourage you to try something else, like maybe implement some different logic for the AI movement. Like the paddle speed is dependent on the distance to the ball. This would make the AI better, I guess. So if it goes faster towards the ball, the further it is away. But maybe it's also just a little bit weird because it slows down the closer it gets to the ball. Try it out. Or yeah, maybe some movement. This could be like a secondary movement that is independent of the ball position maybe. Or maybe just random movement, see how that feels. Or even go for like the holy grail and try to predict this ball movement. You can calculate this, but it's a little bit of math you have to do. Yeah, there's just like in all the previous videos and in game development in general, just so many great options to explore. So we got a little list right here that you know if you've seen the previous parts, that we can tick the AI opponent off. And in the next one, I guess we're gonna do both the ball angle and the build of the game. Yeah, I think so. And then we'll see how much stuff is left. Okay, so that's it for this one. Thanks for tuning in again. Hope you learned something. And if you have any questions or feedback, leave me a comment. And yeah, have a great rest of the day. I see you in the next one. Goodbye.